Welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and I'm back with Rogue Aquariums. He was on last week, and we talked about big tanks and small tanks and what it takes to put a big tank together. So if you haven't seen that video, go back and check it out. Darren, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Good morning. Thank you.
So what do you say today? We just kind of about Zoas. I know we both are big Zoa lovers, so let's just kind of talk about Zoas. So I guess to begin with, do you have a favorite Zoa?
All of them. No, I like some of the red hornets, the blue hornets, the utter chaos, pink diamonds. There's a few I really like, but I'm just kind of getting my feet wet, so to speak, with the Zoas here. So I enjoy them, all the different colorations. A lot of them are really, really, really pretty.
So if I have to pick a Zoa that I like the most, just a named one, I'm gonna go with the Utter Chaos. They're big, fat, gorgeous heads on them. They're really cool. They grow fast, super easy. Love those guys. But in general, I am not a named Zoa kind of guy. I like big, fat, beautiful colonies. I like this stuff coming out of Vietnam that people get. You can get these big rocks reasonably priced, full of Zoas. The problem is they come in, they're kind of dirty, they're a lot of work. So if I really have to choose, what I really love is a big rock that I've seen in somebody's tank where they've put all the Zoas together and they've grown out into like these big, like artificially made combo rocks.
Yeah, I think that is really a really dazzler when you're looking at the different color Zoas just intermingling together. Excuse me. I think it's really cool looking, especially when you watch them climbing up a rock or just engulfing one large rock. The different colorations are really, really striking.
Absolutely. I love that look to them. For the most part, I find Zoas easy to keep. But they're not unkillable. Have you had any coral? Have you had problems with Zoas dying on you before?
A couple of times, but of course, number one, the different colorations you can get from placing your Zoas up higher on the rock ledge or down below. Some of them will the actual polyps will get really large, and some of them will get really bright, and some of them, depending on the placement and the lighting, they can actually the actual polyps can get smaller, so they won't get as much light. And there's a few Zoas out there that like lower light, but there's a lot of them that can tolerate a decent amount of light. I've got some Zoas right now in my frag tank under a Reef Bright Quad Supra. I got 4 T5s and 2 XHOs, and my Zoas are thriving in there right now.
That is cool. I like what you're talking about. It's actually the positioning and lighting makes a huge difference, and it seems like every colony is going to be a little different. One thing I've noticed though is it seems like a lower light and the stems get real long and the colony comes out and gets longer and they're not as bright, where under brighter light they're usually a lot closer to the rock that they're on,
Right.
and a lot flatter. And of course, it seems like water flow has a similar effect on them. Low flow, they tend to pull out more. Higher flow, they seem to pull in more. So it's really interesting how Zoas change in just shape and coloration based on location. I mean, this is a little more unusual for a soft coral.
Yeah, that's true, because I have a 40-gallon where all my corals come in first. So I have I've got 2 Kessel A360s, and they're a good light. They're a good LED. Now I have some Zoas in there, some Tyree rainbows, some rainbow infused Zoas, and they were actually looked like they were climbing. They were stretching for the light. I put them in my larger frag system under the Reef Brights. They're actually darkening up and they're starting to shrink a little bit. So they're not stretching for that light, because they're getting a lot of light where they are right now. And I want to go ahead and get a par meter to actually see what my par readings are in there. but I definitely noticed a color change, and they're not stretching so-called for that light. They actually shrank down a little bit.
That's awesome. The other thing I've noticed is Zoas seem to be like one of the cheapest corals out there. I mean, this is one that I see at frag shows. You'll see good sized frags for like $5. S-
Yeah, there's a lot of zoas you can get fairly inexpensive. I've seen them range for that, and I've seen them go up for over
Oh
$1,000.
yeah, $1,000 a polyp. Yeah, they go for stupid. They can go for stupid money, but it's also it's like a brilliant beginner coral because it's there. You can get them for super cheap prices. And I would have to only say the only thing I would preface on buying the cheap coral is make sure you like it. Otherwise, you'll end up with those teal pallies that I have that like take over
Yeah,
tanks. And
yeah.
once they are in, they're so hardy, they're like impossible to get out of the tank.
I've had some invasive zoas. I wound up, a friend of mine came over here and I gave him a rock full of zoas, and it was the size of my hand.
Right. But I mean,
So,
it's like so that's one thing you have to think about with zoas is once they start growing, and I've got some green pallies in my um, 24 gallon I need to start dealing with. And I haven't decided how I want to do that because I like all the coral around it, but
mhm.
it's a real problem. Like,
Oh yeah,
how am I going to get all of these out? I'm like thinking I'm going to have to glove up, get some carbon for the tank, and then just try to pick them out by hand. And it's probably going to take like multiple treatments because as soon as I pull a couple of them, they're probably all going to pull in. So
yeah. The
it's
actual, but if you're going to take zoas off a rock like that, I found out the best way is to pull that rock out, let them pull in, let the zoas shrink up, and then if you have to, you can either cut them off that rock, or if you have to, just chip that rock off, and then
yeah, so that's the problem is I might have to just cut that whole section off, but it's a pretty good
yeah,
sized section of
yeah,
rock,
yeah.
and they've just taken over. I like the zoas around it. Ugh,
There's a big difference when you're fragging a polyp or two off of
I
a plug. You know, you can take an X-Acto knife or a scalpel or something really sharp and go under the feet of it. But when you're coming on a rock, it's almost impossible to get them off there.
and my problem is if I mean I got a tile saw that makes short work of that rock, but then I have this stupid flat spot on my rock that's gonna
Yeah,
look really dumb.
just more
I,
area to put more zoas on.
I guess I could cut the rock off, right? And then kill the zoas on there, like vinegar and bleach the rock, put it, and then glue it back onto the old rock and grow more zoas on top of it.
Oh yeah, you know,
So
I really like the look of the different zoas. I'm an LPS guy. I'm getting
yeah,
into some SPS, but I really like the different colors of the different zoas. And they're, you know, like you said, they're good beginner zoas. And I know a lot of people who are advanced hobbyists that have them, different types of zoas, and they really enjoy the coloration.
yeah, the color, and so this is one of the things. I mean, zoas come in like every color. That it's so important to know that. Like, if you want cheap and you want bright, zoas are awesome. But you can also have like the most designer ones where people will you'll be able to have zoas that like nobody else is seeing.
Right.
It's really cool. It just spans that whole gamut.
Oh yeah. There's so many of them out there. You know, I'm in the midst right now of collecting different types of zoas, and I'm going to propagate my own. I picked up about a month ago some purple people eaters, really vivid green on the actual out the skirt of it, and the inside was purple. And I got about 5 or 6 of them now. I've got about 4 babies, so I've got 10 on that plug. So they're doing really well in the system. One thing I'll say about zoas is that a lot of them like low light, a lot of them like moderate light, but the flow too. You want to keep the flow. This is just my opinion. You want to keep it where you can actually create a different flow pattern where a lot of the particles can be blown through the tank and the zoas will catch them. You don't have target feed them, so to speak, but they'll do a little bit better if you do target feed them once or maybe twice a week. My problem is I'm putting my large tank together and I've got some tangs in there and they dive bomb those zoas trying to get food off them. So that's the problem. So um, I found out that feeding them like a really, really small pellet or also using the different types of foods that I do use, they really like it. You can also feed them Cyclops. Also, they like that. There's different types of foods you can do it, but they do enjoy the benefit of a meal, and they tend to thrive a little bit better.
That's
So
interesting. I had not heard that they were big on feeding. I know they have mouths like most corals, but I've heard like very mixed results. So it's real cool to hear that you're getting actual feeding responses out of your zoas. That's
yeah,
way
it's going to work better once my fish are out of my large frag. So they'll be able to feed without getting dive bombed on, so to speak. But I try to feed the fish in there. But as you know, I'm in the transition right now of moving my fish, and I've got four tangs in that frag system. So a lot of the zoas don't stand a chance when it.
right.
But that's why I feed my fish first. But I've noticed the benefit of actually target feeding them once or twice a week, and I do the same thing with my acans also. Um, but you don't have to. It's not a requirement. You don't have to target feed those zoas at all because they're a photosynthetic coral. But they do enjoy it.
So one thing I love about zoas is they are a great candidate for propagation. A lot of the zoas we're currently getting are from Australia and Vietnam, but because they're such great candidates for propagation, a lot of the ones that we were getting from Fiji and Indonesia and other places are still around because they grow fast, they're easy to frag, people grow them out. So even if all wild corals were banned, I think zoas are one that would be around forever. They become an industry standard just because they're so easy to grow and propagate.
Exactly. I agree with you. I would agree with you on that. They're one of the easier corals to propagate. They due to the fact is that they grow faster than most. If you want to compare it to a fabia or an acan
Oh,
echinata,
absolutely.
they you can double your frags out of a zoa versus an acan. So they just grow a lot faster.
And one thing that I find interesting is the color variation. I know we talked about it a little, that it can be lighting based and all that, but I've also noticed that just you'll have fire and ice coral, right? I mean, basically your red and blue, red outside, blue centers,
Right.
and pretty standard coral. But you'll see like big variations within the coral. You'll see super bright blue centers with dull outsides. You'll see super bright outsides with dull insides. And then
Mhm.
you'll get the ones that are just amazing with the super bright centers and super bright outsides. And then you'll have the really crap ones that are just dull all the way around.
Exactly.
And no matter how much you work with the crap ones, sometimes you don't get it, and other times they just pop. And it does seem to be a variation within the coral itself. So even within like the same apparent coral, you get better coloration out of some than others. And that's one thing that I just find so amazing is even within the same one, there's a big variation.
Yeah, I found the same thing too. And when you get a coral like that, sometimes you can bring the color out a little bit, but it's amazing how some of the same species of coral can change color like that. And I think a lot of it is due to lighting and flow, but you can't change the color of a coral, so to speak. You can enhance what it has.
It's true, yes.
So that's why you have your different grades of corals. Your A's and your B's and your rainbows and ultras. But
Yeah. No,
um,
it's just funny within the same species,
yeah,
you can
yeah,
almost start to
no,
grade them.
I've noticed that too, and I'm like, wow, this is I've got the same species of this coral, and they're almost completely different looking.
Yeah, and I've done that. I've been to like frag shows and seen a coral that I already had, but that was way nicer than the one I've had. So I
Yeah.
brought it home just because it was amazing.
And it's amazing how some people's systems, the same coral can just look, awesome and it's outstanding. And then
Yeah,
you put it in your system and it's like, is this the same coral? You know what I mean? It's like, so, you
Oh
know,
man, those blue lights at frag shows do that to you, though. I don't know how many times I bought a coral, got it home, and like, I don't remember buying that.
oh man.
But zoas are fun. I mean, they are for the most advanced hobbyists, and they're for like the least advanced hobbyists. They're a perfect beginner coral. They're good for like the uber collector. They're good for the in-between guy. If you want to learn to propagate, they're perfect for that. They are just a really cool coral. And you can get big colonies still at reasonable prices. I mean, I've seen wild colonies come in that were like that insanely huge,
Oh
big
yeah,
pieces.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you've seen that before,
yeah. I mean, I
especially.
mean, I mean, the Australian ones you pay a premium for, and but they're different species. Well, not completely different, but in general, they're different coral than what you're getting from Vietnam. So it's cool that there's this huge variation in what's available, and it's just fun stuff.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right when it comes to that. Also, you talk about the difference. Also, paleonthoas versus the
Yes.
zoas as well. Maybe you can explain to some of the folks out there what the differences are between the two of them.
So, so I mean, that's where it gets real tricky. There's a scientific definition that I don't know off the top of my head. In general, when I think of a pally, I think of the big fat heads with kind of the longer lashes on it. But really, it gets weird. And this is something we were talking about earlier. Most people consider an utter chaos to be a Zoa, and I'm sure there's about 1,000 comments now telling me why I'm an idiot and I'm wrong. But I mean, if you look at an utter chaos, it's this big fat head with these long lashes.
Right.
And in my head, that's a pally, but everybody calls it a Zoa.
Hmm.
And I mean, but then you look at a teal pally, which is like the bane of my existence at the moment, and it's definitely a pally. It's got the big heads, the long lashes. They're kind of thin. It's definitely a pally. The grandis is definitely a pally.
Oh
Those
yeah.
huge heads, those long lashes, definitely a pally. But as far as to where you draw that line to say this one's a pally, this one, how you determine that, I almost think it's like down to a scientific grade that I think is beyond what most hobbyists can do. But I'm sure we'll have a bunch of people in the comments tell me the
exactly.
right way to do it. But I think it really is down to that like species grading by a scientific professional, which is well beyond what most hobbyists are going to be doing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And some of you folks that want to comment in there and let us know what your opinion is. Please feel free. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have to agree with you on that, Scott. There's a there's a sometimes there's a definite difference of a paleothoa versus a zoa, and like you said, when you look at the utter chaos, now I've got some in my system. They should be classified as a paleothoa, but they're zoa. So it's like, I know there's a close difference between the two of them, and sometimes there can be a vast difference. I have some grandis too, and when they open,
Yeah, yeah,
they're the size of a 25-cent piece, a
yeah.
quarter. So, but I know there is a difference between the two of them.
Yeah, and I really think that's getting down to kind of some of that species specific stuff. But I mean, it's fun stuff. It's fun to learn. I really struggle with the common names that people give them because holy crap, we have like three different names for different corals and trying to remember them all. But at the same time, it's a great identifier. So I understand the need for them because as we're talking about utter chaos right now, it's a very common coral. Everybody knows what they are, so they know what we're talking about. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking about this pink coral with these little black spots in it and the long
Right.
tentacles. And people be a little confused. So the common names do make sense from that perspective. But
And you're right. There's so many different names on the zoas. I mean, there's so many I can't even begin to name them all.
right.
There's just tons of them.
And then with the color variations and everything, I mean, I remember I got a big rock once of what I was 90% confident were blue tubs, but usually blue tubs have more brown to them than these had. So it's like, are these blue tubs? Are they a variation? Are they something different? So
Hmm.
it gets a little weird to identify stuff sometimes. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So.
So, anyways, Zoas are fun. I highly recommend them to everybody in the hobby. They are a fantastic coral. So,
Yeah, and for some of you folks out there that just want to start off with some of the Zoas, get some that don't cost you an arm and a leg to start off with, and get a couple of frag plugs with maybe two or three on there. Take decent care of them. They don't require the most important care, but they do have some requirements also, and you'll be able to propagate your own, and they you take care of them, and they'll grow. They'll definitely grow. So, and sometimes you don't take care of them, they'll grow.
yeah, they can be incredibly hardy. Well, thanks for being on the show, Darren. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll do this again here soon.
Sounds great.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Take care.